have you been there? All right. Okay, so how many of you play games on social networks like Facebook or mobile platforms? Almost every table? No? Yes? Okay. How many of you are mobile app developers? Okay. So have you had any downloads of your app more than 1 million? None? Okay. All right. So how do you build a successful mobile gaming app company in this changing landscape of social networks and mobile platforms? So this is what Anil did, and you will hear his wisdom shortly. Anil with his team at M2U00588 not only disrupted the mobile gaming app market by introducing 3 successful titles, War Crime, Modern War, and Kingdom Age, and creating a strong, huge, and passionate fan base of over 20 million game downloads within 9 months of their introduction. So, he's the man if you want to learn how to get your app downloaded over 1 million. And not only that, he also, with his team, built a revenue base of about $5 million per month before successfully selling it to Green International, another large mobile developer, for $210 million. I think this was the only largest mobile gaming app player which was acquired for that amount, and the second one was, as some of you might have played, Angry Birds, 180 million, right? So currently Anil is Senior Vice President of Studio Operations at Green International. Previously also he co-founded 2 other companies. One is Studio 8, which is another role-playing mobile game developer here in Bay Area, and also another startup called M2U00588, which was a question and answer site similar to Quora, which was launched in over 20 colleges. And before that, he was Vice President of Products at Hi-Fi. Some of you may recall or may have had profile. This was the 3rd largest social network in 2007 after Facebook and MySpace. Some of you might not even remember now MySpace and even Hi-Fi for that matter. So you can ask me a lot of questions what happened at Hi-Fi as well during Q&A. So he brings a wealth of experience and is a leading authority in social and mobile gaming market. So without taking too much of thunder, I will invite, let me invite Anil, co-founder of M2U00588 and Senior Vice President at Green International, which is one of the large Japanese game player, with us this evening to share his exciting, entrepreneurial, and colorful journey. Let's give him a big round of applause.
Good evening, everyone, and thanks, Naveen, for the intro. It's always fun coming here to Thai events. I've spoken at a couple of panels at ThaiCon before, and every time I think what really strikes, or the speakers that have really stood out for me, have been the ones who tried to share their knowledge, what influences they had over their careers that got them to where they are. And the second thing that I really tend to enjoy is just learning more about different industries. So it's really actually good to know that some of you are not in mobile, some of you are not gamers, and you're just trying to learn more about the space and the industry. Actually, I find that in your day-to-day work, you're so involved and so engrossed in whatever space you're in that you forget that there's a lot of innovation happening all around you. And some of the innovation can actually be brought into your own space and your own markets and products. So one of the buzzwords right now is gamification. Everyone's trying to look at, okay, Foursquare tried it in the internet consumer. Everyone is aware of the fundamentals of gamification, and then how can we incorporate it into our products, especially actually the enterprise space, the health space. These are industries and markets that are looking at gamification specifically. So with that in mind, this is a really broad topic, and it's very hard to share this within an hour. And of course, I can just ramble on and on. But every entrepreneur's path is different. I think that's something that I have learned through my own life experiences. So what got me here is not necessarily what's going to get you here. But these are just data points that you need to take and hopefully meld them with your own life experiences and figure out how that leads you to the path of entrepreneurship. So I've tried to divide it into 4 parts. The first part is how I came into entrepreneurship, what my road to entrepreneurship was. The second path is thinking through mobile gaming and social gaming. So I've had this unique vantage point of being there, when Hi-Fi was created and when we actually launched the first social platforms and seen the rise of apps, from apps to games, and now what the market is. And from web social networks to mobile, and seeing that transformation happen right before my eyes, and the role that I played in sort of leading the transformation. The third piece is just more around the FunZero experience, and what I think are the keys to building a successful mobile gaming company. And the last part is just what the current trends are. The market is really at an interesting point where I'm noticing there are certain gaps in space in the market. And if some of you are thinking of launching either a gaming company or a mobile app company, maybe you can take advantage of these greenfield opportunities. And of course, after that, we'll open it up for Q&A. So this wasn't something that I planned to do. I grew up in India, and during that time, my dad was in the army, and during that time, I had only 2 options: either become an engineer or become a doctor. So I felt like becoming a doctor was pretty hard. You had to learn a lot, and you would have to spend a lot of cycles, so a lot of years just doing that. So I chose, okay, I'll just become an engineer. That was my path. And from there, but it just sort of, I feel like entrepreneurship I just fell into it. And the reason that I fell into it, if I look back, there were certain life experiences that I had that really allowed me to do that. And in thinking through that, I think the attitude is really important, because if you're a risk-averse person, it's really hard to be an entrepreneur. If you get an MBA like me, you should not be an entrepreneur. It's just too risky. So, and also, I think you just need to have a bag of skill sets which give you the confidence that even if you fail, it's okay, you can rise again and do it over and over again until you succeed. And in some ways, that's what I ended up doing. So, are there people here whose parents went to the armed forces? Okay, excellent. So you will kind of know that experience. So my dad was in the army. My education has spanned 8 cities, and I've changed schools 7 times. So on average, I spent about 2 years at every new place. So it was all about getting to a new city, unpacking your bags, and figuring out, okay, I have to be in a new school, I have to reconnect and develop new relationships, I have to prove myself over and over again. And this kept happening to me every 2 years. And initially, it was extremely stressful, but over time, it actually became a joy. And if I look at what the ride of entrepreneurship is and the roller coaster that you have to go through, the high highs and the low lows when you're starting a company, that's exactly the kind of experience that you go through. So I felt like I became really thick-skinned, and I was not unfazed. And the second thing that was really important was I'm totally unfazed with uncertainty. A startup is nothing, but everything seems uncertain. And the people who can just who have the confidence to overcome that are the ones that typically end up winning. And then the other characteristic, looking at my sort of life experience, has been it's follow your passion. And if you're truly passionate about things, then it'll keep opening up newer opportunities. But it's very hard to be in a startup for years and years if you're not going to be passionate about it. You got to be the best salesman. You got to be a salesman when you're trying to hire folks and convince them that your vision is something that they should be part of. You're trying to sell the company and the vision to investors, and at the end of the day, you're trying to sell the vision to an acquirer or potentially to the to investors in the financial market. So if I look back to my experience here, when I decided that I wanted to be an engineer, I joined Punjab Engineering College, Chandigarh, in aeronautical engineering. And at that time, the only reason I did aeronautical engineering, one was it was all based on rank. So I had option, I could take mechanical, metallurgy, civil engineering, or aeronautical engineering. And I chose it because I really didn't want to do engineering. And I was like, this sounds pretty exotic, so let me do it. So I jumped into it, and the first 2 years, it was just another degree. But it was an experience that I had, 2 internships that I did. One was at Indian Institute of Science, which hopefully some of you are aware. It's in Bangalore. It's one of the most premier postgraduate institutes in India. And the other was working on India's LCA program, that was the Light Combat Aircraft. India was trying to develop its first jet fighter plane, and they wanted to make it a homegrown plane. So they didn't want to buy any technology from outside. So it was those 2 experiences that actually for the first time exposed me to the level of research that was taking place in the aerospace field. It exposed me to the research that was taking place in the US. And for the first time, I was really excited. And what I wanted to do was get a degree from the US and return back to India and join the LCA program. Incidentally, the LCA program is still in development. And I think the plane is now called Tejas. I was looking at it. I don't know whether it's been commercialized yet or has it been launched. Not yet. So this was like 14, 15 years back. So, and that was one of the problems that I ran into when I was so passionate about the aerospace, but I quickly realized that that wasn't my cup of tea too. So anyway, I came here to Iowa State University, and the field that I was trying to really focus on was computational fluid dynamics. Without getting too technical, all it means is you're taking a bunch of computer algorithms and you are matching them up with mathematical principles, and you're trying to study the fluid flow. And in aerospace, all it means is air. You're trying to study how air flows through, for example, the wing of an airplane or flows through the airplane. And basically, you're trying to reduce the drag coefficient. Today, of course, that discipline is used in cars and many other applications. So I came here, Iowa State University, the guy who had written the Bible for CFD or computational fluid dynamics used to teach at Iowa State. So that was my goal. I wanted to study under him. Getting here, within a year, I quickly realized that the realities of the industry. One was, I saw other graduate students working on the same problem for years and years, and all they were trying to do was reduce the drag coefficient by 1% or by 2%. And also after that, it wasn't really clear whether that research would ever see the light of day in terms of getting commercialized. And actually, LCA is a great example. So I was quite disappointed, but yet at the same time, what I realized is that I had learned how to program, and I had learned how to write computer software. So in those days, my option was, should I spend another year and try and get a degree so I could tell my parents I actually have a master's degree and I completed what I set out to do, or should I jump and join a startup in the Bay Area? Those were the late 90s. And this is a little bit unheard of, somebody coming here on H-1 visa and trying on F-1 visa and saying no to his degree. But those were the boom days. I was courted by so many companies in San Francisco, and it was quite an experience. So I ended up leaving my degree within a year. I never completed it, and joined a startup called Ariba. We were in the enterprise space, and those were some crazy days. So I was a software engineer there for about 4.5 years, and really went through the bubble, and then the bust. So again, we were building an auction engine. It was a really cool product. So it's basically eBay, but think about it as a reverse auction engine. So it actually had pretty mathematical application in terms of an auction engine. So we were not doing just a simple eBay. We were doing like Dutch auctions, English auctions, reverse auctions. And we were selling this product for millions of dollars to folks like Ford, GM. And so after spending about 4.5 years going through 4 stock splits, going from $35 billion valuation to about $250 million, going from 3,000 employees, going from 800 employees to 3,000 employees to back to 800. I decided to get my MBA degree at MIT. So this was kind of a turning point for me. Until then, this whole entrepreneurial spirit had never really struck me. I was not convinced that this is something that I wanted to do. But going to MIT, I was also very skeptical about MIT. I wanted to stay here on the West Coast and wanted to do an MBA either at Stanford or Haas at Berkeley. But after getting to MIT, one of the things I realized is, and they do a really good job of this, is from day one, they trust business school students with technical folks. So here you have PhDs, graduate students from all over MIT, and you're supposed to pair up and do stuff. It doesn't matter what you end up doing, but you're just supposed to do stuff. And I really didn't realize until I got there. So some of the things that I was involved with, so MIT has a 100K competition, which is one of America's most premier competitions, business plan competitions. So along with 3 biomedical PhD students, I wrote my first business plan. I wrote my first executive summary. We pitched it to VCs, we pitched it to mentors, and we went all the way up till the semifinals of the MIT business plan competition. I was in a space where I really didn't care about it. I didn't really want to work on DNA sampling with assays chips. That was not my cup of tea. But what was really exciting was that I kind of went through that whole experience for 3 to 4 months. The other things that I did there was I co-founded the MIT Energy Conference, which has now become the premier energy conference in the US. And actually, Vinod Khosla was our first keynote speaker there. So just the experience of working in teams and really doing something that no one else has done before, this is where I started getting my feet wet. And so I did the business plan stuff, but then the one link that was missing for me was really understanding the VC world, because I knew that's the other skill that I needed to have. So I was the co-president of the Venture Capital and Private Equity Club there. And one of the programs I launched was I got the West Coast VCs to come out there to MIT and meet the professors and meet the research students. And that was quite a great experience for me. So the guys, like, for example, who came was Kleiner Perkins brought about 12 partners for one single day that they spent with a bunch of MIT professors and students. So Kleiner Perkins, Mayfield, Bessemer Venture Partners, these were some of the firms that I brought from here. So hearing them interact with the students, interact with the faculty, listening to their pitches, getting their feedback on how they react to folks who are pitching emerging technologies, seeing what kind of companies and what kind of technologies they are looking to fund, that was a really good learning experience for me. So towards the end of the second year in school, I had done the typical thing that business school students do. So I had stuff in the bag. That meant that I had interviewed here in the Valley with the usual suspects, and I had multiple job offers. I also had job offers from small startups. One of them was a 10-person startup called Wink. It was a Greylock funded company, and I had a great job offer there. And the other was, the last one was an idea that I started working. This was my first real entrepreneurial idea. And it came from being at MIT. One of the things that I realized there was there really wasn't a knowledge sharing platform. And what I mean is every year we saw that about 25% of the class is an incoming class. And they tend to ask the same questions over and over again. And not only that incoming class, but whether you're a second year student or a third year student or a senior, people always have questions. So what kind of classes should I take? Who are the good professors? Where's the closest bar? Or so on and on. So these are the kind of questions that actually a lot of students ask all the time. And there wasn't a single repository which had that information, and neither was it searchable. And then we looked at MIT, we looked at Harvard, we looked at Stanford, and we started evaluating the space, and we realized that actually there aren't too many universities that have such a system. So why don't we build it? So along with a classmate of mine, at the business school, we decided to start this company, and the company was called M2U. And so I picked up the phone 2 days before joining Wink, and I called up the CEO, and I said, hey, listen, I really appreciate the offer, but I really need to do this. And this is finally, I made up a mind, I'm really passionate about this space, and I would like to start my own company and manage my own destiny. And the guy, instead of berating me, said, how do I write the first check? So he turned out to be my first investor. And we ended up raising a small seed round and made really very good introductions to other sort of angels in the valley. So through him and through the launch of M2U, I got connected to a lot of people. So I ended up spending about 9 months building M2U. It took us 6 months to launch the product. We launched it in about 20 universities. Unfortunately, we didn't get any traction. So all those user session groups that I had done, spoken to all those kids in these schools who had told me that this would be the best thing since Facebook, it was all wrong. So, and one of the reasons it really didn't work was, and actually Cora does a good job of this, is people in these universities, especially in these tier 1 universities, didn't want to show their friends that they didn't know something. So asking a question meant that I don't know something. People were actually very, very open to answering. And we saw some amazing click-through rates. So what we did actually in the back end, I had 3 MIT PhD students build me a classification engine and a matching engine. So every question would get classified. And at that time, Facebook did not have a platform. They only had an API. So I was just sucking up the user's profile data, and we were matching the question to a user's profile based on their Facebook information. So if you were at Harvard and you had written biking as one of your hobbies, and there was somebody in Harvard who would ask a question about where are the good biking routes at Harvard, or biking trails near Harvard, it would actually send you an email. And the response rate to that was over 70%. But unfortunately, what we never got to was enough scale where we were getting enough content being created on the site. And so that was one reason. The second thing that didn't really work was the two founders, me and my other business school partner, we were bi-coastal. So he was in New Jersey and I was here, and that really didn't work out. So with those two realities, after 9 months, I decided to shut down the company. But then, as I said, I was still extremely passionate about the space and extremely passionate about internet consumer space. So as luck has it, or as I believe, a new opportunity opened for me, which was one of my advisors was the founder of High Five. And as soon as he realized that I was shutting down the company, he immediately told me, hey, why don't you come and help us and you can lead the product. So this was an opportunity pre-Series A. They were still under 30 people, and it was on its path to becoming the 3rd largest social network. So at that time, it was MySpace, Facebook, and High Five. So MySpace used to dominate the US market, Facebook dominated the college market, and High Five was the global social network, and primarily the global Spanish social network. So it was very popular in Spanish-speaking countries. And of course, there were a lot of Indians on High Five too. So that's how I landed up with that opportunity, and I ended up running product for them. And with that, what that really gave me an insight into was the launch of the platforms. And of course, everybody knows that Facebook launched its platform in May 2007, and subsequently, all the other social networks launched their platforms. MySpace launched just right before High Five, but it was MySpace. MySpace's platform was still in beta, and then High Five launched it. And I was on the board of the Open Social Foundation, which was Google's response to the Facebook platform. And pretty much MySpace, High Five, Mixi in Japan, and some other Russian social networks, they all basically built their platforms on top of the Open Social platform that Google had created. So because of that, I really had an amazing vantage point to see what was working on the social platforms and what kind of apps were being created by both independent developers as well as developers who were extremely well funded. And in the early days, what we noticed was that the kind of apps that were doing really well were these lightweight apps. And I don't know how many of you remember Superbook, Top Friends, Vampires, Zombies. So these were apps that were annoying. So some developers, like Slide and Rock You, I don't know whether you guys remember Slide and Rock You. Slide got, I think, a $500 million valuation at some point. But those guys they were focused more on building apps that would get really fast growth. But most of these developers hadn't figured out how to give enough depth in their apps, which would have users coming back over and over again. So that was their problem, but they had also another thesis in terms of a business model thesis. And the business model thesis was this would all be advertising based. That's how they would make money. So for that, they needed a massive audience. And some of these guys had, for example, Facebook had the poke feature, if you guys recall. I don't even know where that is now. But then poke was you just poke a friend. Basically, it's like a nudge on an eye network. And they built Super Poke. So instead of just poking, you could actually wink. You could actually smile. And every time you would do that, you would get a notification. It would appear on the news feed and it would go even more viral. Or the vampires guys, where a vampire would come and bite you, and then you would get a notification, and you would bite them back. And then there would be a war. Back and forth it would go, until all your friends are annoyed and they hate you. So the reality here was, while these apps were gaining all the traction, the platforms like Hi5, Facebook, were looking at this very negatively. This was actually ruining our user experience. And we were working pretty hard to stop these spammy apps. And then there was this segment of developers that quickly realized that and said, you know what, it will be more interesting if we build something more engaging. And that's when these light apps started trending more towards how do we make light social games. And one of the first ones that I can recall was a text-based role-playing game. It's RPGs. And basically what a role-playing game is, you actually role-play as a fictional character in a game. That's basically a role-playing game. It's a very common term in the gaming space. And so for example, let me talk about Mob Wars. So there's a game called Mob Wars. It was one of the first text-based role-playing games. Then came Mafia Wars. We launched a game at FunZero called Crime City. And the whole premise here is that you are a petty criminal in a particular city, and you go out in the city, you do all these petty jobs, and you do all these missions. You can kidnap the DA, you can steal court documents. So you do all these kind of missions in the game, and the whole purpose is you rise through the ranks to become the mafia boss. And in that whole experience, you also fight with other criminals. And then, of course, you're earning more money, you're earning more power, you're earning more respect, and that helps you keep progressing through the game. So that's the basic premise of an RPG, especially a crime-based RPG. So that's what Mob Wars was. And it was literally an HTML page where you would say, steal court documents, and it was a button that you would press 15 times. And every time you press, it gives you the result. Yeah, you succeeded. Do it again. You succeeded. Do it again. You succeeded. Do it again. And then here's your payout. Here's how much cash you get. Here's how much respect points you get. And you just keep moving up the levels. And that game, in about 4 to 5 months, it was rumored, and I've not been able to get the accurate number, but it was rumored to be doing $1 million a month. And this is back in 2008, towards the end of 2008. So while you had guys like Slide and Rocky focusing on brand advertising, let's monetize through traditional web-based advertising, there were developers who were, this was a one-man shop by the way, Mob Wars, who were figuring out how can we monetize and bring the free-to-play concept into the market. And by free-to-play, and which is what all FunZero games are, and even Storm8, the company that I founded before this, are, which is basically means, and all of Zynga's games, mostly, I think recently launched a paid game, but it's free for everyone to play. But if you don't want to grind it out, if you don't want to keep pushing the button 15 times, you don't have hours and hours of time to invest, you can cheat. And the way we allow you to cheat is, why don't you buy some speed? Why don't you, instead of waiting, why don't you pay some money to us and we'll speed it up for you? Or in Farmville, everyone gets a basic fence. But if you really want that pink diamond-crusted fence, please open your wallet and give me $30 for it, right? And all you need is a very small percentage of your user base to pay. And if they pay, then it's a really exciting business. So just to throw out some numbers, which might surprise. So first is only about 1 to 3% of the user base pays on a daily basis. Some games obviously see a lot higher. And everything is, these are some generalizations that I'm making, but it all depends on the genre of games that you build. But for example, in some of our games, the top spender within the third, fourth month had paid about $40,000. We have people who pay $5,000 a month on an ongoing basis, all on mobile phones. I bet Zynga has pretty good programs for what they do with their high rollers. So it might seem trivial, like I don't understand how you monetize. I hear this from a lot of developers. I don't understand how you monetize. Who are these people? Sometimes even we wonder, who are these people? But basically the whole idea is that if you really build an engaging mousetrap, this business is a really, really good business. And we are now part of a Japanese company, and in Japan, they've been seeing this, they've been doing this for over 10 years now. And I think the free-to-play model really came from Asia. And it really became how big it is because of the social networks. So I was at High Five and I was seeing all these changes happening on the platform. And I was seeing which apps were working. I was seeing what kind of genres were working, which ones were retaining users and users were coming back, and which games were actually monetizing. And at that time, I had this unique opportunity. One of my friends called me up and said, hey, listen, the iOS platform has just launched. It does not have in-app purchases. So when Apple launched, it could not support a free-to-play model. I know many of us might not remember that. But it was basically based on an iTunes model. Okay, so you pay 99 cents for songs, same way you're going to pay for games. And so because of that, it did attract actually a lot of indie developers initially. Also, when it launched, because it had just launched, mobile was still puny compared to Facebook. But I clearly, looking at the High Five example, I clearly knew, like, if you're early in the platform, it's not necessarily that you're going to end up winning. Because a lot of these people, Slide, RockU, SGN, did not end up winning. And Zynga was actually late to the platform. It wasn't necessarily early to the platform. But you do have an early advantage of acquiring a lot of users. So if you can actually build something compelling and you can continue to innovate, you can keep those users. So with that, with a few folks from Facebook and Zynga, I started a company called StoreMate. And we were one of the pioneers during those days. It was bootstrapped. We had figured out how to market our games on the App Store. But there really wasn't a business model yet. And we were waiting for Apple at some point to just turn on in-app purchases. So in my tenure there, we launched about 7 games, and they were all text-based role-playing games. Basically just hitting the same buttons all day long. And all 7 games hit top 10 free. And 4 of them hit #1. So we had really hacked growth. And we really knew how to promote our apps and take them to the top, and it was an amazing experience. But towards the end of my time there, there were a few harsh realities that at least for me and my other co-founder, we realized. One was on Facebook. Actually, we saw these text-based role-playing games dying. So Farmville had launched, and it had actually shown that the opportunity wasn't 1 million users. The opportunity was 80 million users, 100 million users, right? So at its peak, Farmville was 80 million. And then we would look at our 7 games, and we would look at our daily active users, or the number of users that were playing the game on a monthly basis. It was just tiny. And And so a couple of the Stormgate founders, our thesis was that in order to attract a large audience, we would need to be on multiple platforms. And we would need to focus actually on Facebook first, mobile second. So that was one. Again, this is 2009, early 2010 timeframe. The second thesis was that in terms of text-based RPGs would no longer be successful on mobile. We will need to innovate. And just like the Facebook users had moved from text-based RPGs to flash-based games, which were more immersive and more virtual worlds, in the same way, the mobile users would also move, and they would soon start demanding that level of innovation. So with that in mind, and just one last point was, and this is pretty important, was we realized that not a single company had really figured this out. And this is really hard in gaming. If you want to be a successful social gaming company, you have to succeed in all platforms. And this is our thesis back in 2010. So we think about a user and we say, okay, if you're playing the game on Facebook, you should be able to, when you're waiting for your coffee at Starbucks, you should be able to whip out your smartphone and you should be able to continue playing the game where you left it on Facebook. And that was something that we hadn't seen anyone else try and do. Here's another example. Here is Farmville is a great example. So while Farmville had this massive user base on Facebook, when they launched on mobile, it was a complete dud. That game, virtually, it was a disaster. And that speaks to how hard it is to take the same IP from one platform and move it to the other. So with that, let me move to the next phase of the presentation, which is going to be just more about Funzio and what I think are sort of some of the lessons and keys to our success. And again, as I mentioned, the top reasons why we started Funzio. And our vision was very simple. It was like we wanted to build AAA social games that were really fun to play, and we didn't want to care about the platform on which you were playing the game. Well, I explained the platform piece, but I really want to focus on the AAA social games because it's important. And this harks back to what I said about we were tired of these text-based games, and we knew the users were tired, and we were constantly seeing people were raising the bar of technology on Facebook, and that wasn't happening on mobile phones. So what do I mean by AAA social games? So I'm not saying AAA console games, because if you look at our games, they are nowhere close to AAA console games. But what it means is way better graphic quality, way better animation. The games are optimized for the iPad and the tablet experience. So when you play it on tablets, it's a great experience. It's not yet a console experience, but in terms of a social game, it's way better than what other competitors put out. And that was pretty important. So it's not just the technology that needs to be AAA. Also, the second important piece is we also want the game design. There's not much innovation happening in this space, as you keep hearing. People are getting burned out by the same game mechanics over and over again. So we also laser focused on how can we improve the base game design in a way that's the game is actually really fun to play. The person who spends $40,000 does not regret it the next day. That was important. So here, I just wanted to give folks a flavor for those people who haven't really played the game. This is Kingdom Age. This was a third game right before the acquisition. We launched this, and this is just a trailer. So it's the fantasy genre, and let's see if this works. It's a trailer on YouTube that we built. So guys like Activision will spend millions of dollars to make just that trailer. We probably spent $5,000 or $10,000 to build this one. gives you a flavor for the kind of game. So this is meant to be played both on mobile as well as it was launched on Facebook. It was also launched on Google+. I think this is a really important point. I meet a bunch of entrepreneurs today that are looking to build gaming companies. And I can immediately bucket people into two categories. One category are folks that are extremely data-driven. They get the data, they get the analysis piece of it, but they don't understand the creativity piece. And then you meet the other guys that are awfully creative, that are trying to launch a game that's pushing the boundaries of game design in every way, or that is technically really superior than any other game that I've seen, at least in the casual space, in the social space. But then they don't have a clue about analytics. And then I ask them, how many team members do you have who are focused on data? And their response is, oh, we are looking to hire somebody. Or their response is that we are just trying to, we're just going to integrate with one of the off-the-shelf analytics systems. And I think that's the big mistake that a lot of companies make, especially gaming companies in the space. And at this stage, given what's happened to some companies, it's really like you'll have winners for a year or for 6 months, and then you won't see those guys again in the App Store. They'll just disappear. And one of the reasons is it's really hard to actually strike this balance between creativity and between a data-driven approach. So what we tend to do at Funzio is we spend a lot of time upfront doing market research. Why do we want to do a particular genre of game? Why do we think, how crowded is that game genre on iOS, on Android, potentially on Facebook? Who are the competitors? Did other game developers launch there before us? And if they did launch a similar game, why did it fail? So we try and do a lot of upfront analysis and work on sort of the competitive market research. Then the second thing we tend to do is we really focus on what's the Funzio angle and now what's the Agree angle. So okay, so even if you feel we still want to go and do the same game, the same genre, what is going to be our differentiator? And that's really important to nail down. And from that stage, we hand it over to the game designers. And the game designers come up with a beautiful game design. They have that hypothesis. They say, this is how we think the user is going to progress in the game. This is how fast they're going to go. These are the points at which they're going to monetize. These are the reasons the user is going to come back every single day. And then every game goes through a soft launch or a beta launch process, where we will launch it, let's say, in Canada or in Australia. And then we will look at the metrics. That's when sort of the data team takes over. And actually, Karan is here, who's part of the data team at Agree. And sort of his team will take that over, and he's going to look at, okay, whatever hypothesis we had, is that correct? Are the assumptions that we made, are they correct? And is that what's happening in the game? And we will run a series of A/B tests. So in some ways, we have this initial pretty good creative process, and then when it moves into launch, then it becomes a more data-driven process. But even during the data-driven process, if you're trying to run certain tests, we will bring in the game designers. Because it's got to make sense. You just can't slap on monetization features. You cannot slap on retention features. It just got to make sense with the genre of game, with the game mechanic that you're trying to encourage the users to do. So it's really hard to do, and that's why there are very, very few gaming companies today in the space that are doing this. So that are doing this really well. So one example of a company that's doing well, that I think is doing well, is Supercell. They're, I think, based in Helsinki. They have a couple of games that they've launched on mobile. Another company that is doing well is Backflip Studios. So, but very, very few game developers get this. The second point I want to make is social gaming space changes very fast. So it is not an old stodgy industry like aeronautical or other software companies. I'm from the enterprise space too. Every quarter, literally, these platforms are changing the rules. User acquisition is going up, or user acquisition is changing. The retention channels that you used 3 months ago are no longer valid because, again, the rules have changed. And you really need a team that's nimble enough, fast enough to be constantly evolving. And I think this is also another reason why I think this industry tends to attract a younger generation. Not just because it's gaming, but also because I don't want the technology guys to be so focused on any one technology. We don't want people who are just headstrong. iOS is the, Objective-C is the only way to go, and I would never want to learn Android. Great example is, we launched Crime City on Facebook. So our thesis was, it's going to be Facebook first and mobile second, right? So we are building the game, 6 months into the company, Facebook changes all the rules of the platform. And suddenly, everyone's games are declining. We're 6 months into it, we're 2 months away from launch. We do the launch, the game receives actually a lot of critical praise. There was even a question on Quora, has Crime City moved the bar for all social games? I still remember that one. And the game has like 4.8 on 5 stars, right? We get to close to 1 million daily active users in the game. But yet, the ROI for the game is not there. I can clearly see that we are monetizing, but we are not monetizing based on once the rules have changed, because our initial assumptions were quite different. And then what do we do? So after about 3 more months, we decide, while Facebook is still lucrative, it is not what we thought it to be. So let's move to mobile, and let's start focusing on mobile. So the same team, so for example, one of our best Objective-C iOS engineer is our best Flash engineer. And so it was really critical for us right from the start to be able to build a team that could cross over the technology barriers, that was not focused on any one. Also, in terms of the founding team, so there were 4 founders. My other co-founder, Ken, he is the product guy. He has lived and breathed these games from day one. He actually built his social game that he sold to Zynga. And so it's really important, as I said, matching the creative piece with the data-driven piece. So it's really important when you're trying to start a social gaming company today that you have a very strong product leader. Without that, you're not going to succeed. Second, it's really important to have a guy who can actually scale the engine. So scalability is pretty important. Actually, in the initial years, Playdom is a great example. They built a game called Social City. Playdom is a company that sold to Disney for over $500 million. And they built a game called Social City. And they pumped so much marketing dollars into it, and the game started doing really well. It reached 500,000 users, daily active users. It reached 1 million daily active users. And after 1 million daily active users, the app just crashed. It just couldn't scale. And however much money they would pour in, and however many technologists that they would pour in, you only get one shot at these Facebook users. And if you lose them, and if your app stops loading, people are just going to go away, and they're going to go to the next shiny thing. And so it's really important to have somebody in the team that can actually scale to millions of users. Actually, Words with Friends, that OMG Pop that Zynga ended up buying, that was actually one of the best things that they did, which was when they were getting 20 million, 30 million users, that app was able to scale. And so in our team, my VP of engineering at High Five, who had scaled the company from 100,000 users to 60 million users a month, he was the other co-founder. The third guy that we had in the founding team was somebody who was an expert on client code.